Thank you for tuning in to the best parenting show on the internet, Post Daily Dose.
It's the Post. It's the Post. It's the Post. The Post Daily Dose. It's the Post. It's the Post. It's the Post. The Post Daily Dose. It's the Post. It's the Post.
Hello, beautiful people there on Facebook. Good evening and welcome to another episode of Post Daily Dose with me, your trusted parenting advisor, faithful guide and servant on the healing journey. What's my name? Big Papa Baby, Brian+Post. Hope everyone is doing fantastic this fine evening. And I just posted in the Post+Institute Facebook feed a link to an article that a friend sent me regarding a 10-year-old. A 10-year-old little girl who is being convicted of murder for killing a 6-month-old child. And it's a pretty short little clip, but it just it made me think. When we start talking about justice and injustice, how do we know? How do we really know? And it reminds me of Dorothy Otnow Lewis, who wrote the book Guilty by Reason of Insanity. And she's a psychiatrist at Bellevue, and she's one of the last people to hug and kiss Ted Bundy because she became very close to him while studying him when he was on death row, and she gave him a hug before he was, I guess, put to death. I was going to say electrocuted, but I'm not sure how he was put to death. I just know he was put to death. And so she studied some of our society's worst serial killers and psychopaths. And she came to find out that almost every single one of them had a severe history of abuse. And so her contention was that these adults that commit these horrible crimes, it's not that they shouldn't be incarcerated, but should we morally put them to death when we know they have experienced, like they've been victims. They were victims and then they became perpetrators. So, good evening, Mother. So, morally, ethically, do they deserve to be put to death when in fact we know that their early beginnings were of trauma and that they were traumatized and therefore that had some kind of influence on their lives. And it just made me think when I saw the little video this morning of the little 10-year-old foster child. And, you know, number one, she's a foster child. She's probably been through in so many different placements. There's no telling what her early history has been. She's in a foster home. She's in a foster home where they also have a daycare, which means there are probably way too many children. It's just classic inside the parenting matrix behaviors. So how does a 10-year-old end up holding a 6-month-old anyway? I'm curious. And then being completely left unattended with the 6-month-old. And then dropping the baby. The baby starts to cry. The little girl can't get the baby to stop crying, so she starts stomping on the baby, which sounds horrible. But she said she started stomping on the baby to get it to stop crying. You know what? There's no reason not to believe this little girl. There's no telling what she has experienced at the hands of adults. There's no telling what kind of imprint she has for emotion, for crying, what happens when you get in trouble, the threats, the fears. You know, she could have been in a home that she really loves, and all of a sudden she drops this little baby. It scares her, and the baby's scared, and she's, you know, something bad's going to happen. Something bad's going to happen if she doesn't get the baby to stop crying. It reminds me. So then we have to wonder, not only emotionally, but developmentally, how old is this child? Okay, we're saying she's 10, but she's been in foster care she's in a foster care placement. There's no way she's 10 years old. So she's probably, probably closer to 2 or 3 emotionally. But we put her out there as being 10 years old, and so then they're, they I guess they give her bail for $50,000 or something, and the little girl's terrified, and what are we going to do with that? And then they say she was too young to go to a psychiatric hospital. No, that's not true. They put kids younger than 10 in psychiatric hospitals all the time. Well, what are we going to do with this little girl that's any different? So she obviously did something bad. Like, no one likes to think about anyone stomping an infant. No one likes to think about that. And we probably are prone to want, especially within the matrix, we're prone to want to vilify this little girl on some level. If she wasn't for the fact that she was 10, she would definitely be vilified. But you let enough professionals chime in, and pretty soon she'll be conduct disordered and reactive attachment disorder and all these other kind of disorders that basically label her as being crazy. We don't know that that's just we don't know that there's any reality or any truth to any of that, other than diagnoses are just usually ridiculous. But what's the system going to do with a 10-year-old that's going to have any positive impact on her life? So they're going to probably end up putting her in some kind of inpatient psychiatric facility with other young children. They'll send her somewhere, and she will inevitably not get any better, and she won't have a home. And because of the crime she's committed, no one is going to take her into their home because everyone's going to be terrified of her. And so they're probably going to spend upwards of $15,000 a month on her care. It's not unusual, especially when you start talking about high-level psychiatric facilities. And she's most likely to be in some form of care like that till she's 18. And then maybe she doesn't move from there into adult incarceration. Who knows what the justice system is thinking when it comes to a situation like this? But what I can tell you is that they're definitely not thinking about how to create healing for this little girl and what it's going to take. Anyone at any age who commits an act on an infant and the infant ends up dying is going to be scarred for life. So that's going to be a deep wound for life. So then you compound that with, the environment you put the child in, the other individuals around the child, and then what are you left with? So what do we do? Well, I'll take the child in. How's that? So if someone's got to take responsibility, if we can keep this child from going into a psychiatric placement, how about you send the child to Big Papa and let me bring her in. Let me talk to the state. Have the state, whatever state has got custody on this child, reach out to me, and let's discuss the possibility of having her sent to be in my care, and potentially in my care until she's ready to transition to a home, an adoptive home. And let me take the responsibility for helping this child heal and helping this child recreate some of the experiences that will not recreate, but create the experiences that are going to be important for helping this little girl actually have a life. So what if we did that? What if we did that instead of just shipping her off to some inpatient psychiatric hospital? Hey, Leslie. Hey, Kirsten and Heidi. What if we did something radically different? Because you already know, the justice system, the social workers already know where she's headed at this point. So what's the risk? What's the harm? Okay, let's have a conversation. Let's have a conversation, and let's see if we can do something different for this child than we have done with thousands of other children who've been in the same situation as this little girl, and whose lives are inevitably being lived out in the prison system. Because what's the statistic? 80% of individuals in prison have been in foster care. That was a statistic like 10 years ago. So there's no telling what that's at now. So if any of you happen to live in the state where this situation has happened, again, I put the video in the feed and you watch it. If you happen to hear about this situation, send a link to this video to the social workers or the justice system, and let's see if they reach out, and let's see if we can figure out a way to do something different. Because I know this little girl is capable of healing. I know she's capable of living a life with some challenges, but we all have challenges, and she made a mistake. And it's a terrible mistake, and none of us want to think about that mistake. But is at 10 years old, having been in foster care for years, can we truly hold this child responsible for her actions? I do not think we can. I feel like every adult around this child is responsible for this child, beginning from the adults who conceived her, right up to the adults whose home she was in the care of, and the social workers who placed her in that home, and now the justice system and anyone else that comes into interaction with this little girl. And do I think her foster parents need to have anything to do with her at this point? No, I don't. No, I don't. I feel like she needs a different level of care. She needs people who understand her. She needs people in her life who understand trauma. And she also needs people who are willing to be loving and forgiving and help her learn to love and forgive herself, because this is something that she will have a hard time forgiving herself for. And she doesn't need more adults just judging her and shaming her and going from there. So Angela says, it said she was just taken from bio mom in September, not years. Okay, well, then that means she spent the last 10 years in probably an environment of neglect and abuse, because why else does a 10-year-old get taken from their mother after 10 years? So there's probably a big backstory, and you could just, I mean, it would just, yeah, it's just living in an environment of trauma, and it's unfortunate and it's sad. So there you have it. Let's see if we can do something different. And say a prayer for this little girl. Say a prayer for all people involved in her life, that we might use wisdom and understanding and forgiveness and compassion and find a different way of setting this little girl up for her future life. So that's all Big Papa's got this evening. It's kind of depressing, but I got that story first thing this morning. It's kind of overwhelming. So God bless each and every one of you. Thank you for tuning in once again. I hope you rest well this evening. Wake up, restored, refreshed, re-energized, reinvigorated, and ready to make Tuesday terrific Tuesday. God bless you. Big Papa loves you, and we'll see you tomorrow.